talking and having a good time. Good afternoon. My name is Meg Cruz, and I'm taller than the last person. And I am a board member of DER. I'm the secretary of the executive board, and I'm happy to welcome all of you here today to our monthly luncheon and partnership with the Foundation Center. DER co-hosts this very, very popular panel every year with our partnership with the Foundation Center. So we wanted to say thank you, along with the San Francisco Business Times as well. This is a very special panel that we put together every year, and it's always our most popular. So thank you for being here. DER is a professional association organization here in the Bay Area, and we provide educational classes for organizations of all sizes. We are of the people, for the people, and focus on Bay Area topics, Bay Area experts, and we love having everyone's participation in our vocation. So can I just see a show of hands really quickly of who is a DER member in the room? Fantastic. Wow, over half. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for being members of the organization. Our membership is part of what sustains DER along with our fundraising. So I wanted to discuss, at the risk of a little self-promotion, the upcoming Fundraisers Anxiety Busters, which will be held on the 6th floor at Foundation Center. I will be speaking on a panel with another former DER board member, Eric Talbert. We're going to be talking about year-end fundraising focused on annual giving topics to end the year strongly in 2016. That will be December 1st and starting at 3 p.m. And last but not least, if you're ever interested in learning more about events with DER, visit our website. You're going to be noticing some changes in 2017, dersf.org. Again, it's dersf.org. And so check back soon for our next class and topics. Well, now it's my pleasure to introduce Kirsten Moore from San Francisco Business Times. We appreciate them being part of this event today, and I'll hand it over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm Kirsten Moore, and I oversee community partnerships with the San Francisco Business Times. I want to thank the Foundation Center for inviting me today and for our longstanding partnership. As some of you might know, the San Francisco Business Times recognizes the region's top corporate philanthropists, ranked by total cash giving, and we celebrate and honor them at a breakfast every July. One of my personal and great pleasures of attending our corporate philanthropy event is seeing how much companies learn from each other. So many of them are long-time corporate philanthropists, while others are just beginning to create a culture of giving. I hope that you'll join us next July for our program, so please come see me after the panel if anyone has any questions. And I would like to welcome and introduce Michelle Dilworth, the director of the Foundation Center.
Thank you, Kirsten. So I just want to thank the San Francisco Business Times for being such a longstanding partner on this event, as well as DER for this longstanding partnership, not only on this program, but for all the other programs that we partner with throughout the year. So thank you all. I'd also like to welcome everyone here in the room, both panelists as well as audience, and then also this program is being live streamed, so everyone up in the live stream audience out in the ether, welcome. We're happy to have you here today. I also would just like to say a special welcome to those who might be new with the Foundation Center, and just give you a little brief overview of who we are. And for those who know us well, please be patient as I do just a brief overview of who we are. We are an organization, a nonprofit, whose mission is to strengthen the social sector by advancing knowledge on philanthropy in the U.S. and around the world. Our charge is really to connect people who want to change the world with the resources they need to succeed. We serve grant makers, social investors, nonprofits, and other do-gooders with the data-driven tools, research, analysis, training, and programs such as the one today, so that people can further their missions and maximize impact. Foundation Center West is one of 5 regional offices across the country, and if you've not visited us, we are located on the 6th floor of this building here at 312 Sutter Street. And you could also visit our website, foundationcenter.org, to learn more about us. Before I introduce our esteemed panelists, I would like to just set some ground rules for today, or just give you a little logistical background. First, we'll be opening up the conversation to Q&A after the panel discussion. So please contribute questions in one of 2 ways. For those in the room, we have folks who are going to be coming around with paper so that you can write down questions, and then they'll be brought up and I will share them out. That's for the benefit of those who are listening to the live stream, and so that everyone in the room can hear the questions. And if you're in the live stream audience, just type in a question in the chat box on YouTube, and we will get that. It'll be transcribed, and I will share up here. I would like to remind everyone that this is a pitch-free zone today, meaning that any questions that are asked that require a great deal of detail about your specific organization are not what we're looking for today. We're looking for questions that help inform all of us of what is going on in corporate philanthropy, and we ask that you keep your questions general in nature so that we can all benefit, the whole entire group can benefit from the nature of your question. I also would like to invite you all to tweet about the event. Our hashtag is corporate philanthropy for the day, and then we also tweet at FC Live, hashtag FC Live for all our live stream events. And now on to the program. We are so excited to have such a stellar group of panelists with us today. They represent an exemplary cohort of corporations which have cultivated a culture of giving within their organizations and which are dedicated to giving back to our community. Joining us today, we will hear from Heidi Racherla, who is the Senior Vice President of Community Engagement and Market Manager at Bank of America, Lakshmi Karan, who is the Executive Director at Genentech Foundation, and Charlie Hale, who is the Head of Public Policy and Community Engagement at Pinterest.
Did you look at my beard when you said hair?
I did. We were talking about association earlier, and I can't help it. I guess that's really where I was going with that. Well, please join me in welcoming today's panelists. So for starters, just so we have an idea of who you are and what you do, I ask each of you, maybe starting from Heidi and working down, to tell us what organization you're with and what your role is at the organization, and if you've been there for a long time, how that role has evolved over time.
Certainly, happy to. Good afternoon, everyone. Yay, nay? All right, there. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Heidi Racherla, and I have been with Bank of America now for 15 years, this coming December. Started as a teller in college, never thought this was going to be a career, and essentially over the course of post-graduation, just moved into the next opportunity, and have had some incredible mentors. But 15 years in the company, and essentially for the last 8, I was what you would consider a district manager. So I had 30 branches of teammates, branch managers, about 350 associates total across our San Francisco Bay Area, primarily in Silicon Valley. And we always had an incredible passion for community, volunteerism, and just having a lot of fun together. And through that effort and that passion, when this role opened up, which was around community engagement, both with our nonprofit partners here in the San Francisco East Bay Area, as well as our civic leaders, business leaders, it was such an incredible opportunity, I had to go for it. So I'm a whopping 5 months in role, but talk about a fire hose of incredible opportunity to learn and meet so many wonderful partners and to really engage very thoughtfully in the work that we're doing across San Francisco East Bay. So it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Hi, Lakshmi Karan. So I've been at Genentech 2.5 years, and Genentech, as you know, is celebrating our 40th anniversary this year, and we've have a culture of giving throughout. But as it happens when companies grow organically, the issue areas kind of grew up, and so they were looking to bring in someone to create an overarching strategy, so we can be more focused and also leverage our extremely enthusiastic employees. I bet maybe some of you have relatives or friends who work at Genentech and hear a lot about our Gives Back events. At Genentech, I oversee 2 entities. I am the executive director of our private foundation, corporate foundation. I also manage all of our corporate giving within the company side. So the simplest way to explain it is I have 23 bosses, 2 teams, 2 legal structures, 2 compliance rules. But in some ways, it's really been helpful because we're now at a point where we've streamlined our focus across the 2 entities and can bring better clarity to our grantee partners so they understand what our focus is. And so that's where we are. Most of our giving is in the healthcare space, and we do a lot of community giving as well around our sites in the U.S. Just another point is we are an affiliate of Roche Pharmaceuticals that bought us. So my mandate for Genentech is North America. We don't do anything global. It gets taken care of from our colleagues in Basel. So, happy to answer any other questions about the focus and stuff later.
And my name is Charlie Hale. I oversee 2 different areas at Pinterest. One is public policy, which is not so much kind of political, I'm not going to talk about politics today. You're welcome. It's more of the kind of nerdy strategy work of how do we think about privacy and copyright, things like that. Excuse me. And then the other side that I run and look after is our social impact community kind of philanthropy work. And Michelle and I were talking about this before the event. I think ideally those 2 departments, or PR and social impact, or marketing and social impact, should never really be kind of in the same group. I think sometimes doing social impact work for some political end or PR benefit is not the ideal structure. I just happen to manage both because we are small still, and I think ideally we'll break those out eventually. But in my role before Pinterest, where I've been for a couple years, I was at Google in a group called Google X, which did kind of experimental self-driving cars and balloon internet and other weird things. But on the side, co-founded a nonprofit called Global Health Corps, where actually I think Lakshmi and I realized we may have crossed paths. And so was really excited to come to Pinterest and kind of merge those two worlds. So honored to be here. I know you all are busy and you took time out of your day to come. So grateful that you came. I would have been on the live stream if I were you. You could sit at home in your sweatpants and watch. So thank you for coming in person. Appreciate it.
You wouldn't have gotten the lunch, though.
That's true. That's true.
So each of you come from organizations which are good role models for organizations that really embrace a culture of giving. And I'm wondering if you can share with us how this culture is fostered and encouraged within your organizations. And maybe we'll start this way, Charlie. Start with you and go down.
Sure. So I would say a couple ways. The first was surprising to me. It's actually been important in my mind to focus on branding of our work internally, which was something that seemed less important, seemed a little bit superficial in terms of what you call your internal program. But it actually has been really important for us. We have 4, as many companies do, we have kind of 4 company values that we talk a lot about. And the one that I like the most is called knitting, which is both a reference to our kind of crafty roots at Pinterest, but also essentially a term for teaching and learning from each other, kind of working across functions. So an engineer, yes, can build that product, but has to work with a designer to make it intuitive, and a marketing and PR person to explain it. And all those groups have to kind of knit together and teach and learn from each other to build the product. And our view is that if you just do that collaboration and teaching and learning internally, you're leaving a lot on the table that we should also be kind of teaching and learning from folks outside the company. And that's both the right thing to do and important to engage in the community, but also selfishly will help us be more creative and thoughtful and empathetic, and that will make us build better products and be better people and so on. So we have called our internal program Knit SF, which is all about kind of engaging externally, and not in a kind of condescending, like we are blessing you with our time and our money, et cetera, but in a very kind of two-way, we learn just as much and get just as much from these interactions as you do. We had some engineers start a computer club at the public school nearby, and that's a good thing to do, but also, when that engineer is then sitting down and coding and they're thinking about their interaction with a kid who's learning how to code for the first time, there'll be more thoughtful and creative in how they approach their work, and that makes them a better, better engineer. So branding has been really important, and the second has been, I think, institutionalizing it in other parts of the company. So we have team offsites, which are now increasingly every quarter. Our teams will get together for a bonding session instead of just going to, a bowling day or going to a bar. We increasingly have kind of service-centric offsites, which have been great. And then orientation, I think, is probably the most impactful way that we've tried to build it into the company. So every Friday, I'll actually be doing this tomorrow. We take our new hires on a walk around the neighborhood. We feel like they've been oriented to the company. They should be oriented to SOMA, which is where we're based. And we essentially do kind of a tour. We do like a walking tour of our neighborhood and meet different nonprofits that we work with and give folks an understanding of the history and the culture. And there's a large Filipino population and heritage in that neighborhood, which I think a lot of folks don't know. And then on that walk, we stop at 2 SROs, kind of low-income residential buildings, and we handle the deliveries for Meals on Wheels at these 2 buildings. And we do it every Friday. It's not, a manufactured event to make us feel good about ourselves, although it does. It's basically to take that operational load off of Meals on Wheels, and we've done it now for almost a year, every Friday without fail, and it's been a really consistent and great way to kind of orient ourselves to the neighborhood and to set a tone with our employees the first week that service is so important that we're doing it literally on your 5th day at the company. So.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
So Genentech's, like I said, 40 years, but still holds on to a culture of being a scrappy biotech startup. I think from the founders' days, there always was this mantra that I keep hearing when I started, which is work hard, play hard, give back. I think that was the culture of let's, cure disease, let's fight disease, let's also enjoy ourselves, and then let's give back. So that's kind of been the thread of many things. And now our biggest headquarters is here in South City. We have about 13,000 employees in the Bay Area. And we've got now, I would say, over 200 what we call DNA groups. It's all about the DNA. These are employee self-selected groups that volunteer around any issue that they really care about that's supported by the company. And the largest one being here is around, it's called Green Genes. It's about the environment, and there's a lot that they do in volunteering. Again, self-selected group of employees around activities. And that's something that just is organically organized by employees, supported by HR, and they promote it. But about 6 years ago, we started an event, and you may have heard about this, called the Genentech Gives Back Week, which is a whole week in June where every employee has permission to volunteer the entire week. And it really, of course you could volunteer year-round, and this is just, on clock. But it is really an opportunity to bring communities together, because what we often learned was people in research, they're just so focused around being in the labs and doing the research, it's hard to kind of get out to those community activities. But this was really, in some ways, knitting people across different groups that come together. And we bring nonprofits on campus for activities that employees can support, or they go out, and some of this can be as simple as helping the local elementary school redo its playgrounds, or do swab kits for DNA donor match. So it can vary. But I think what I'm really proud of when I think of our kind of culture is how employee volunteerism has driven our strategy. So what started off as a DNA group that cared about mentoring students, and they started off in South San Francisco. They said, let's work with the local elementary school and mentor kids. Over 5 years has now blossomed to 300 kids bused on campus 2 days a week, actually. This year it's 2 days. It used to be 1 day a week, for one-on-one mentoring with 600 employees throughout the school year. It's just an incredible kind of rewarding experience for employees. And of course, the kids are benefiting with that one-on-one. But for employees, this is this opportunity of a direct give back and building that relationship with the kid. And so now that we've had this program for many years, many of our volunteers have been with that kid through elementary school. And so we've built our STEM commitment around this program, because again, looking at the enthusiasm of the employees and saying what's the real value, and now expanded it to include middle school and high school kids in South City. So there is this kind of thread, although I get credit every time I talk about the program, I have to remind myself that it actually came from a bunch of employees years ago saying, we love mentoring and let's just go and do it. And how do they influence the company to really start investing in those things? So that's what we do.
Thank you. I don't know if I can find a knitting connection, but I definitely have a
It's okay,
DNA
you don't have
one.
to.
So I'll plug shamelessly. So really, our culture is in our DNA, and it really started with our founder, San Francisco local, A.P. Giannini, and the whole sense of who do we serve and why do we serve. And so it's a big part of our identity at Bank of America. And the piece that I'm really proud about is the fact that now it's global, as well as it's local, and then ultimately for us to be truly successful, it has to be personal as well. And so our company at the enterprise level does so much around the world. It's amazing, great things to be proud of. But I think the biggest piece for us and how we translate that to the partnerships that we have locally in the San Francisco East Bay, that's very meaningful. And then ultimately in the ways that we encourage our teammates and make it personal, because they have the opportunity as one of our benefits to be able to volunteer 2 hours a week, paid time with the approval of their manager, to really make an impact in what's important to them. And that's a piece we want to encourage, support, because we truly believe that personal passion, it can't just because, okay, the company's putting on an event and we'd love to see you there. That's a key part of it, and it is an opportunity, but we want it to really start with what they care about first and foremost. And so we encourage them. It's obviously in our policies and procedures, and what's exciting is that in addition to that component, even from a personal giving perspective, every employee of the bank has the ability to have up to $5,000 of their own personal giving matched by the company to qualified nonprofits on an annual basis. So again, that thread for us, what are we doing globally at the enterprise level? How do we connect it through our local market teams and the leaders that I help support here? And then ultimately, are we making it personal for each of our teammates, and are we role models in that as well? So it's been an exciting journey to see where it's come over the last 15 years. And for me particularly, the last 5 months in my role, just to see it this up close and personal has been frightening, exhilarating, exciting, all of those things. But I can't tell you how proud I am, and it's just such an honor to be able to talk about these things in a public forum. And I was sharing with my teammates earlier, this is my first public speaking opportunity externally. I've done it plenty of times internally. I couldn't even eat breakfast, lunch, coffee. It's just going to give me anxiety. I think I scarfed down a banana earlier, but it does make me tremendously proud and happy to be here to share our culture with all of you. So thank you.
And you did a great job, because we have a match program that I never mentioned, so thank you for sharing it. I remember.
Well, I think that gets to my next question, and just the idea of, for each of you, what is the nature of community support within your organization? Does it take CSR? Is it CSR? Is it foundation? Is it a combination? Is it matching? So just to give us an idea of how it's structured in your organization. Heidi, why don't we start with you and go this way?
Okay.
I'm back.
It's so great to sit in the middle.
Yeah. You wait. I'll pick on you later.
Sure. So for us, what I would say the evolution of CSR and giving is really now in years past and throughout our history, we've always been very active in the giving space of it. So the philanthropy, what we realized and learned as an organization coming out of the financial crisis 7-8 years ago was, how do we help transform that to above and beyond just a check? And that was something I loved from the San Francisco Business Times, beyond the check. And so we started to evaluate much more critically the kind of role we could play in partnering, what were initiatives that were broader and more important to us, like financial literacy, especially after the housing crisis. How did we help communities really understand the importance of money, and therefore our partnership with the Khan Academy and Better Money Habits, really allowing that to be a platform for any client, any community member, any organization to really help those for which being savvy about their money and making decisions may not have been as easy for others of us. And so really that transformation came down to, at that time frame, what we would consider housing, which included homelessness, hunger, so basic needs, et cetera, critical needs, and then job creation, so that whole sense of workforce development. And so as we've refined that, those are really our standing priorities as an organization. But again, to that point about being both global, local, and personal, we have that ability to customize within community development, not only affordable housing, et cetera, but really some of our anchor organizations in arts and culture. So it gives us a broad enough lens to have some thoughtful impact, but also the ability to have the latitude to make the decisions that we want locally. And so that's been an ongoing transformation. And what you'll hear a lot now, we released this year what we're calling our environmental, social, and governance report. So many of you may have received it from our team. I'll be happy to forward that out. But it really, again, takes that thoughtful approach. Can we make much more of a concerted impact if we really are looking at those things collectively? And so from an environmental perspective, not just what are the organizations that we fund and support, but on the flip side, are we supporting legislation that enhances that opportunity? Are we thought partners with institutes of academia and thoughtful consideration on how to make that happen? And then in addition, again, personally, each Bank of America employee has the opportunity to take advantage of a green refund if we purchase a vehicle for our own personal use and decide to buy a hybrid or an electric car. So there's just so much of that that I think is an ongoing conversation for us, doing this, again, 100 years plus. It really is now how do we continue to evolve and change, and it's not just about the money, but it really is much more about that concerted effort with partners in the community, businesses, organizations, and really continue to further that cause collectively.
So for Genentech, we are we're not as robust as we'd like from a CSR framework, but really a lot of our giving falls under 3 pillars, kind of creating value for patients, for the planet, and for people. I'll kind of break down what that might look like. Patients are the center of our work, center of our focus, why we show up, why we do what we do. And when we think about patients, it's in different ways. One is direct support for patients who cannot afford our medicines. So we do product donations, we have copay assistance programs that we work with, but we also do a lot of patient awareness education programs, and that's working again with patient advocacy groups. But kind of stepping back more upstream, a lot of our research grants that indirectly benefit patients is really strengthening health systems or identifying, saying what are some mitigating factors that, kind of help patients, limit patients from accessing the treatments that they might need. So this is all within the kind of value for patients space. For the planet is, I don't know if you guys have been to our campus. It's I think, one of the greenest campuses. Is Google here? No. You're not wearing your Google hat. One of the greenest campuses. Really tremendous emphasis all the way from our manufacturing. So Genentech manufactures its own biologics. We've got manufacturing plants around the country. So really kind of being mindful of the carbon footprint and being really environmentally conscious about it. And then expanding that to, the work environment. So really a lot of emphasis around wellness and well-being is also kind of being brought into our programs. And then the last part, when we talk about people, really we think of it in 2 different ways, people within the company and people around where we live and work in our communities. So when we look at our company, there's a lot of emphasis around diversity and inclusion. As you may have noted, just diversity in the sciences is pretty low in this country. And so really looking at gender diversity and more racial balance within the workforce, I think there's a focus for the company. And when we talk about communities, it's really responding to what are the needs in that community. So, for example, in the Bay Area, we are really looking at, homelessness, hunger, but really from the lens of how can we increase the career pathways for people facing these issues into the biotech sector. Because we know that's a growing sector, it has a lot of needs, and how do we support? So that's a lens. But we also have sites in other parts of the countries where the needs might be different. So we have a plant in Kentucky, in Louisville, There's not a big biotech sector hub as it is in South San Francisco. So we really work with local nonprofits to better identify what are their needs. And so we've got a very robust community college partnership program looking at vocational training, apprenticeship models. So really, when we think about people, it's internal as well as in our communities. And across these, we knit together volunteerism. So we've got, when I talk about patients, we have a lot, so just to back up a bit, Genentech's largest portfolio is in the oncology space. And I think, cancer is such a growing burden in our community. So we have employees just personally being touched by it. And so there's a lot of volunteerism around survivorships or, working with organizations with cancer patients. And then in the planet space, creating value for the planet, there's a lot around the environmental give back. And then in the communities again. So I think we look at the volunteerism as kind of cross-cutting across where we might put our money and our other assets.
So I would characterize our CSR work as a bit more organic by necessity because I am a team of one, which, initially I saw as a weakness. I would love to have many colleagues like the two of you that, and lots more kind of institutional support. But I think it's actually forced us to be more diffuse, which I think is a strength. Even going back to the branding, not to push knit. And actually, this is the first time I've talked about that brand externally, so it's not me just being obnoxious, I promise. But the reason I didn't want to use a term like Pinterest for Good or, Pinterest.org is that I think in some companies you can, if you're not in that group, then it suggests that maybe you're Pinterest for bad or Pinterest for, your job is to just build products and make money, and then there's a small group in the corner of the company that's lucky enough to be able to work on good things. And I think everybody wants to work on good things. Everyone wants to feel like they're having some impact and some positive impact. So in some ways, because I'm a team of one, I have to force everybody to think of themselves as part of the Pinterest for Good group. And I think we have aspirations, to be like my colleagues on the panel, to be a bit more, I guess, national or global. And we are a global company. When I started, we were about 300 employees, and vast majority of our users were in the U.S. And we just hit our 50% mark. So now we have more users outside the U.S. than inside the U.S. And I met with our teams from Paris and Berlin, and we're starting Knit Berlin and Knit Paris and Knit New York and Knit Chicago, et cetera, which is great. But I think in the meantime, we want to focus on our backyard. We feel like SOMA in particular in San Francisco has a lot of need, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. We think our sector in particular has enjoyed a lot of success and growth, and that has not been inclusive of a lot of folks right in our backyard. And we would like to work on big global issues, but we feel like it's more important to start here. So, just one example of kind of trying to build that into the culture and to be a bit more diffuse. We learned that the public school in our neighborhood had the highest number of homeless students of any other school in SFUSD. I think it's about 1 in 7 were either homeless or in some kind of transitional housing 2 blocks away. And that felt wrong and felt like that was something we should probably try to focus on. And we worked with the school and asked kind of what they needed help with, and they didn't have anyone who had kind of a social work, kind of trauma clinical therapy background to work with these kids who literally don't know, where their next meal is coming from or where they're staying that night. So we were able to fund a social worker position full-time in the school. That was a gentleman that had that background, worked at Larkin Street, had a background in this kind of clinical therapy work, and is now full-time at the school, just focused on those kids. And we have a women's group, one of the DNA groups that we have, Women at Pinterest, and they have now started working with a social worker who's getting, school supplies and clothes and soap and things that his students need, and he's putting that in a secret Pinterest board, and they're just buying those small items, on a daily basis. And actually yesterday, after the election, everyone was so depressed that we got a whole new batch of school supplies and clothes and the like, and the women group bought them all in like 30 minutes because they're like, I need to do something good. I need to feel better about the world. And that was kind of a very tangible, small way for them to do that. So those are the types of things I want every group to have something that they're working on and to not view it as a fringe thing that they do, 1 day a month or whatever. I'm not saying this to get applause. I'm just telling you. I'm trying to answer the question.
Just a question about that. Is this effort with the school part of the Circle the Schools program within SF City, or is this something that you started initially on your own?
I would say it's inspired by that program, but it's focused on that population in particular. And so, my dream would be that we scale this out to more schools and more companies. I think even with the Meals on Wheels project, we have 2 buildings that we serve. Zendesk also has another building that they have essentially said we will take care of the deliveries at that building. And I think the hope is that if more companies can take on, just one building right in their backyard or one school or one thing, and then we kind of collectively all, do our part, that will help, in this case, Meals on Wheels, relieve the operational load, or SFUSD get the resources they need, the skills that they don't have.
Great. And just that is reference to, I don't know if you know, there is a program here in San Francisco called Circle the Schools. So I would just say go to sfcity.com, CITI, and you can learn more about that program. But nice to know that it's also coming internally as well. Lakshmi, since you haven't had a chance to speak first, we want to give you that opportunity. I'm interested in the structure at Genentech, how you wear 2 hats and have 20 plus bosses, and how that structure works. What do you think the strengths and weaknesses of it are, and is it typical for a company to have that type of structure?
So it doesn't have to be 2 structures. It's what I inherited. I initially thought I should have a pithy answer when I started the job as to why and justify. There really isn't. There are companies that just have one corporate entity and do all of their giving through that. There's some that just write a check to a corporate foundation and handle everything out of it. We just structured this way. For a while, I tried to see if I could merge the 2, but I think I started to understand why there are some benefits of keeping it separate. I think on the corporate side, the nature of our business is we have a very strong healthcare compliance oversight to everything that we do. And so that is something that limits your ability to do certain types of interventions. And then whereas the corporate private foundation frees you up to pursue certain things. Again, in some ways, I do not handle the policy side or the government relations side. We have a government relations folks. So any activity I do from the corporate side has a lot more stringent rules. Not that I can free to do whatever I want with the foundation, but I think it's just it creates more opportunity for innovation and some creativity and fast, rapid prototyping type of model than you might with the constraints of within the corporate giving. But that said, there's no reason you should have 2 entities. But if anyone can think of a good one, tell me, 'cause then my next response might actually be more.
Well, everyone has talked a little bit about their giving priorities, which I think everyone here is probably excited to hear about. And I'm wondering, besides coming to a program like this, how do people find out what your giving priorities are, or corporations in general, and how do you suggest people look for them so that they know if they're aligned or not with the organization? Why don't we start with you, Charlie?
Unfortunately, it's just coming to programs like this. I think for us, we're still, like I said, when I started, we were about 300 people, and I do not have the resources to, have a standalone site that talks all about our work. And I also think we felt like we wanted to do more work first and not talk about it. We kind of felt like we should have some substance and there should be some there, and instead of talking about what we're doing first, which is not to say that can't be useful, and we might in the future, but unfortunately it's kind of, this is it.
Great, thanks.
We have a website that has a lot of guidance and a lot of compliance jargon and stuff, and it's not the prettiest site. We're actually in the midst of making it more relatable. It currently reads very compliancy for those of you who've actually gone through that process. But our employees, they are our biggest get the word out. So I actually spend more time actually meeting with departments and small groups and helping them understand what our priorities are. I think it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, we get fantastic referrals of amazing organizations that my team may not come across. And then the other advantage is they really push me to be clear about my strategy because they get super excited. And so we get a lot of referrals, and so we end up saying no more than we say yes. And so then we have to answer as to why no. So that's actually keeping us on our toes in making sure we're being very clear, we're being very thoughtful, but also thinking holistically. Because our employees, I think, bring a lot of richness, whether they are on boards or they volunteer to the work that we do. So I think our word of mouth is probably the biggest value of how we find amazing organizations.
We have a website as well. It's called bankofamerica.com/San Francisco. And so again, it is geared towards our local efforts, both in philanthropy, volunteerism, and actually some of our partners, including the SF AIDS Foundation and some of our writers from ALC. And I was a roadie one year, and oh my gosh, that was the hardest work I've ever done for free. And so really enjoyed that. But it's a great way for us to get the word out, showcase many of the partnerships that we have. On the flip side for us, it is also a very grassroots opportunity. And I know this is a big piece of when we partner locally with over 150 organizations with double that trying to get into the portfolio, you know, it's very much an opportunity for us to continue to work with those that we've worked with for many years, but also to be very open to innovation, opportunity, what's new. And in many cases, our best opportunities, like Lakshmi mentioned, come from the passion of our teammates. And if it's something, especially if there's a board service opportunity, or they've been active in an ongoing volunteer role or a leadership or a committee role, and especially as it aligns even better to our priorities around workforce development, community development, basic needs. Again, those are the ways, and those are a lot of the entry points for us in finding out about great organizations. And there's an established commitment already, because the flip side is, again, if you have a limited budget, as everybody does, at whatever level, it really is how do we help maximize that. And so we typically will include a link to our foundation on the Bank of America San Francisco website I mentioned, but in many cases, as we meet each other and partner, I'm very much a small team now, and so it was a bit of a difference for me to move from managing 30 people directly to now only 2. But it's a mighty dream team, as I like to say, and one of my teammates in particular is very involved with many of you on the foundation side of the house. The other side is, again, the corporate sponsorships and some of the work there, media, et cetera, with the Business Times and other organizations. But that's our team, and for the most part, we are very responsive. But at the same time, we want to make sure that you're equipped and have the information. We have our 3 cycles of RFPs that we do on an annual basis aligned to those 3 priorities. And again, we send out an annual communication saying, okay, Q1 expect this, Q2, Q3, just so that, again, there's alignment. And for many of your grant writers, it's a good opportunity to schedule and prioritize. So those are just some of the forums that we use. But I think the biggest surprise and win for us are the introductions that have come organically from our own teammates' passion.
Let's jump in. Heidi's really helping me out. I didn't mention the website. Well, our website is www.gene.com. On the corporate side, it's year-round open application based on the focus areas. And on the foundation, it's by invitation only because we are getting more targeted in what we want to fund, and so we are really tapping into other funders and referrals. So that's the distinction.
Thank you. I'm going to say that we have about a half an hour left, so I have a few more questions that I'm going to ask, but if you have your pieces of papers, people will be coming around any time now to start grabbing those, or if you're still thinking about your questions, let me know, or just start writing them down so that we can get to those as well.
And Michelle, if anybody needs a blank, raise your hand.
Yeah. All right. And then again, for those live stream, just start putting them in the chat, and someone will transcribe those and get those to me. Charlie, I just want to turn to you for a second, and just as a relatively new company, I think that sometimes folks think that, you're flush with cash as you're growing, and sometimes that's not the case, or, the money needs to be going to investing into the organization. So I'm just wondering if you can talk about how to manage expectations on what people, especially here in this area, should expect from an up-and-coming startup, and what they can and can't do in the corporate giving space.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm part of a group of 4 nonprofit leaders and 4 folks in positions like mine, and we get together a lot and talk about different issues we're facing. And this was one of the things that came up recently. And it's hard because I think most tech companies fall into probably one of 3 buckets. You have companies that are actually legally required to give because they have some CBO or tax benefit. So Twitter, Zendesk, companies like that. You have companies that are expected to give because they're so big and successful and profitable that it'd be really horrible if they didn't. So Google, Facebook, et cetera. And then companies like ours that I think are somewhat recognizable brands and are in many cases well funded, but in some cases are just starting to make any money at all. And so yes, we do have a good amount of funding, but it was someone else's money that was given to us to build the company, and so puts me in a tough position because I would just, if I had my druthers, would just give it all away. But that's probably not a responsible stewardship of that funding. So yeah, we are in a little bit of a tough middle ground, and I'd say, coming from having started a nonprofit, I understand that sometimes the most helpful thing is just funding, and we have, going back to the social worker position, we will give money if we can in ways that we think are going to be impactful. We just have to be more strategic and more thoughtful about who we're giving money to. And then otherwise, it's just trying to be kind of generous with our time, with our space, with our other in-kind donations that we can make. We try to just be an open office. We think a lot of tech companies in particular are seen as kind of inaccessible and closed to the rest of the community. So we had a big holiday fair that we do every year last weekend, which I love, having small businesses come in and sell holiday gifts in our physical office, and just having our neighbors come in and have delicious churros and cider and buy holiday gifts. We've donated, lots of volunteer programs, things like the women's group, buying small gifts here and there, donating laptops, things like that. But yeah, but I try to be really upfront with nonprofits because I know that time is the most precious resource, and so I don't want to keep nonprofits wondering, if I'm going to give them a grant or not, and so yeah.
Great. If any of you have anything to add on that question, otherwise I'll just move on to all these.
What we think tech companies ought to do. Well, sorry, what was the question?
Well, just in general, just I think there is this sense that, there's a lot of capital being invested in these startups, and an expectation perhaps that they can share it out, and sometimes they can't at this point in time in their career. And I think we hope that they're the bright shiny objects that can give you bright shiny objects, but not all the time that happens. So we just wanted to put that out there. I have lots of great questions from you all, and so I'll start asking them, and I hope we can get to as many as we can. One which I think which is a good one, I think, is just for those for invitation only applications. Any advice on how one can get referred to be part of that invite only situation?
So we used to have an open application process. I'll tell you why we went for invitation only. We realized that the biggest value we can bring to the issue around homelessness and food insecurity was helping people get career pathways in biotech. We realized there were already great organizations doing this work. How do we partner with them? So we did a lot of gathering and listening to what are the opportunities and where can we have the biggest influence. And that led us to the path of let's start to focus. So the biggest referrals that we get is through other funders, because leverage is one thing every funder is looking for. With limited funding and limited resources and exponential vision and aspiration, we really are looking to partner with other funders and say how can we collectively get a better outcome. So absolutely, if you've got a funder that is focusing on those topics, I think having that funder call us is a great referral. That said, we have 13,000 employees, and we don't always take all of the introductions we get through our employees. But if you feel there is, really looking at our website and our focus areas, there is really kind of an alignment, a strong alignment, and you reach out through an employee with a context that is tied to what we are trying to do, we absolutely take those meetings. We don't have a very big team, but we certainly do take those employee referrals as well.
Can I just comment on that? Because ours is open according to each of the RFP cycles, and so aligned to that. But in our case, we do have one specific award. It's our Neighborhood Builders Award, the most prestigious award that we have, and it's a $200,000 grant over 2 years for 2 organizations in our San Francisco East Bay on an annual basis. And so that is by invitation only. But because we are so connected and committed, the actual selection committee is made up of only 25% Bank of America leaders like myself. The remaining 75% are in some cases your peers, executive directors at different organizations that we partner with, key influencers in the community, and to Lakshmi's comment about my other hat around engaging civic leaders, some of them represent our mayor's offices in both San Francisco and or Oakland. And so that is our only invitation-only opportunity, but it is among our most prestigious, and at that point it really is about a transformative organization doing incredible work with a very solid track record, and it's those leaders in our community, both in the civic and nonprofit world, that are really sourcing those on our behalf. And so that is the only one, but everything else for us with the $5 million that we do in the San Francisco Bay Area from a grant and foundation perspective is open, as long as it is aligned to the majority of our philanthropic pillars.
Thank you. So many questions. I will really try to get to as many as I can. One of these I'm bringing up now because we did have a side conversation about this earlier, and it's a question about capacity building for nonprofits. And so, just a question whether you fund capacity building for your grantees or for other nonprofits, such as leadership and management training, et cetera.
Not yet. We plan on, but not yet.
Go ahead, Karan.
I would say this is somewhat tangential, but something we've noticed in the tech space in particular is that a lot of tech companies want to fund really kind of bright, shiny objects, or they want to, disrupt homelessness or pick your issue. And I think we are open to those types of opportunities, but we also feel like we need to fund homeless shelters in our neighborhood. We need to fund kind of other basic programs that are just taking care of people right now. And so I would think of capacity building in that vein of, if we think an organization is doing great work and they need help being more strategic, or doing career development, or they need supplies or laptops, things like that, even if it's not some innovative, sexy new way of approaching that issue, and it's just kind of helping that organization, we would view it as just as important.
The only piece I'd add, because the Neighborhood Builders that I mentioned, that award, not only with the support over the course of 2 years, also includes leadership development for the executive director and an emerging leader, and that's part of our conversation from earlier. And so coming into the space and being able to see that for the first time now, I see it as an opportunity from a capacity building perspective to say, how do we potentially help bring that, again, local to an opportunity, across an organization like several that we partner with, to really help support and create something that's viable. So I don't know necessarily from a funding perspective, but if there are workshops, skills-based volunteerism, mentorship that even our leaders can help support, because that's the other component of really bringing it to life. So I think there's a lot more to discuss, Michelle, just based on our commentary from today, but I think that's something that everyone can benefit from. And one of the key things coming back from a national meeting last week with some of these neighborhood builders in Charlotte big conversation around how invaluable that component of leadership development was, really above and beyond the check, extensively, to be able to have that opportunity to connect with peers, to get into workshops, to hear from some pretty amazing leaders. And the last gentleman that was a speaker for both the neighborhood builders and the market managers was a gentleman that was really engaged to help create capacity and strength in storytelling. And I really found that very compelling, because in many cases, everyone does such good work, but are we able to effectively, quickly, succinctly get to the point with both passion, inspiration, humor, all of that, but also some very specific outcomes and impacts that we want to be able to share? Because with the prioritization around really, who the grants are going to go to, we have to be able to tell all sides of the story. And so I think that was very compelling, and that was something I took back as a potential that could we host that for our local organizations as much as just our neighborhood builders. So just more to come, but it definitely sparked some strong thought.
I would just add on to that I think some of the most gratifying things that we've been a part of from our side are the pieces that are more capacity building, where it's taking the skill set that an employee might have. So we had a data scientist help the city. The Food Insecurity Task Force had a lot of data that they needed to parse through around what's the state of food insecurity in San Francisco. And for that data scientist, it didn't feel like a volunteerism, obligation, because it was a fun problem that he was good at. And so I think to the extent that, you need help with skills or, other projects that may take, we were talking to a homeless shelter in our neighborhood that is a 100-plus-year-old organization, and they want to kind of rebrand themselves, and they need help from a marketing kind of brand strategist. And we have lots of folks that do that very well, and they're happy to give their time. So.
Thank you. This is getting a little bit to that, but just the idea of that when, there's a lot of talk of measurement, for nonprofits. How do you know you're doing good? And one of the questions we had here was, how do you know that your organizations are doing good? How do you know that your efforts are actually making differences in the lives of people, not necessarily the organizations, but the people you're trying to reach?
Is someone from my team here writing all these questions? It's one of the things that we are right in the midst of. I think, we support hundreds of organizations across many areas, and we're starting to streamline that, is really better understand, what is the gap that we're trying to address, being really clear with our strategies, involving our grantees to help define what those partnerships really look like, aligning, so rather than support, 50 STEM organizations around the country, really getting clear, like, we're looking to bridge a particular, diversity gap or a particular focus, and how do we bringing those partners together? So we're really, I think we see measurement not just as a validation that we've spent the funds in a proper way, but more of a validation of, are we asking the right questions to really help address the issues, or is this a superficial exercise of spending some money? And so we are bringing a lot of that rigor in. We're not there yet. I think we're starting with where the information we have, also being mindful that, many in my team, myself included, have come from the nonprofit sector. So we understand that, we don't want to put nonprofits through an exercise of reporting for the sake of checking a box, but really working to say, what are you measuring? What are the just three things? You could measure 50, that's great. What are the three things that you can tell us is really moving the needle on what you care about? We care about that. And help us integrate that into how we should think about the issue. So I think there really is now a dialogue as we think about measurement.
Thank you.
We do not do measurement yet. We would like to, obviously, as we become more mature, we will. We do one piece of measurement, which is just internal for the NITSF orientation that we do every Friday, and we send out a survey to all the employees and ask them, did they think it was impactful? Did it help them understand the company better? Did it make them more excited to be at Pinterest? And I made it a priority of doing that measurement so that I could use that to kind of justify why we should be investing in this for retention and morale and recruiting and things like that. And it's by far our highest rated event that we do during orientation. So it's been a very helpful piece of measurement.
Great, thank you. Do you have anything to add? No? Okay, great. So one of the questions is around international strategy, that all of you are part of global organizations, and we've talked a lot about here in our community, but are there any efforts and a larger global sense of what your organization does? You know, Heidi, maybe we could start with you, just because I know you do have the different levels.
Certainly. So what I would consider a great pull-through along those lines is, for example, with our international support of RED and just the fight against AIDS, and very high-profile work with Bono et al. Again, you know, a $10 million commitment that finished in 2015, and $10 million committed at our company level over the next 5 years. You know, very powerful to see, and we've got lots of ways that we're activating that locally. As we come through, a long-time partnership with San Francisco AIDS Foundation, Chris and his team here, and that, again, not only from a board service perspective, how we're connecting it to our opportunity. We've had a very active AIDS life cycle team for the last several years, one of the top corporate donors, and then ultimately some of the opportunities to engage our teammates as well. So in many of our focus areas, you know, we'll see that theme again and again, where we've got to find ways to continue to make a huge impact globally, but without that sense of how does it translate locally, we're really always just going to be that big organization. And I think, you know, many of us in differing continuum, in different areas of the continuum, you know, again, a larger corporation, I think we have the opportunity to really make it feel local and personal, and that's how we continue to do that. And so whether it's, you know, $80 billion in financing for environmental bonds at the corporate level, or like I said, the fact that I bought a Camry hybrid and got $3,000 back from my company when I did, again, it's just so many touch points. And so what's been an opportunity for me is making sure our teammates really know and understand that. And we might see something in the news, we might see something in an advertising campaign, but until a teammate is really a proud local ambassador to be able to share some of that and really has some of his or her own data points and experience, it's really hard to be able to quantify that impact. So I think that's that flex point for us continually to talk about our global and our enterprise work, but again, to be very local and specifically very personal as well. And just from my own experience, and part of the reason I came to be considered for this role was having that passion for being a top performer. It was absolutely a business imperative in the market that I supported, and that translated to my role now, where I'm a leader amongst our lines of business to really ensure that our investment partners and our mortgage partners and our small business partners really understand the impact that we're making in the community. And so just knowing that, I think that's a big help. The other piece is really that engagement from our associates. We all know the cost of talent here, just with the housing and everything else that goes into being part of the Bay Area economy. And so again, that retention and development, engagement of our talent is so key. And because we created that culture in my former role and the team that I managed, every survey we got back that we did annually, our market specifically, I'm so proud of them, we were always typically 7 to 10 points higher in every brand, every pride, every engagement metric because of that culture we created. And so now my passion and my goal is to translate that across all of San Francisco East Bay. But it's a challenge, and I'm excited and humbled and terrified to be here, but very proud.
Just on the international piece, we definitely hope to work. I mean, we're a global company, and I would love to get to the point where we have, like my colleagues have, kind of pillars of issues that we work on globally, and I think we have some idea of what those are. But in the meantime, it's helping the offices in each country kind of create their own version of NIDSF. So, talked to a woman in our Paris office the other day who has started a nonprofit focused on the refugee crisis in Europe right now. She and some friends who are chefs started a food truck, and they took it to a bunch of the refugee camps and both, you know, fed folks, but also taught kind of basic chef skills and kind of workforce development skills for that population to be able to, you know, land in France and have more kind of employment opportunities without the language, you know, with the language barriers and all that. So I'd love to basically kind of have every office find an issue and something that works for them, and if it ties back to what Pinterest does in terms of creativity and ideas and education and things like that, then all the better.
Anything? Okay. So here's a good one, I think. And just in light of recent events, do you have thoughts or concerns about possible changes in corporate philanthropy with all the potential market volatility, I should say?
I think one of the biggest weaknesses of the corporate philanthropy or even nonprofit space is that sometimes it can be the first to go. You know, it's kind of seen as the nice to have piece of a company or of an organization, which has been part of the motivation for me to try to build it into the DNA of the entire company. If we see it as core to how we build products and core to how we recruit and retain employees and core to morale, then it can't be cut, you know? And I also think, especially in light of how difficult things are right now, that's even a stronger case for why we need to help our employees feel empowered and to be doing good work in the face of, many challenges.
Yeah, I think to echo that point, I think, even just within Genentech, the culture of giving has been there. For 40 years, I'm sure there have been many tumultuous times that we're going through. So I feel heartened about that. But I think it's not that you make money, you do good. It's how you make your money that you're doing good. And I think to embody that with your employees, with how you treat your business partners, to how you're engaging with your community, I think that's that conversation that we, who are in the corporate philanthropy space, or partners have to start setting. And then it's an integral part of how you show up in your community. And then it gets powerful.
The only other key piece that I'd add around that is, for us, it is absolutely the right thing to do, and it's a business imperative. And so, especially along that platform of ESG, environmental, social, governance, particularly in light of what's happened recently for some of our neighbors and friends here in San Francisco in particular, even just with some of the passage of legislation in our home state, technically of where our headquarters is now. There's so much conversation around, are we going to be leaders who do the right thing regardless? And so we were the first to come out immediately against HB2 in North Carolina, regardless of the impact that it's had here, and there is legislation that's been signed that says the city will no longer do business with anybody whose headquarters is in North Carolina. But obviously we understand that it's a 100-year plus relationship that we've banked the city of San Francisco. And so obviously we'll find ways to continue to do good locally and personally. The other flip side for us is from a diversity and inclusion perspective. Over 50% of our global workforce is women. And so that's an exciting thing for me personally, that we continue to have programs that support the development of diverse leaders. We've got programs that support, obviously, the fact that we have a huge opportunity in connecting that above and beyond just what's on the surface. And so I think for us, I'm not concerned about anything changing necessarily because of what's happening in Washington, D.C. I'm more concerned about how do we continue to evolve our corporate citizenship in a way that's foundationally part of who we are and how we do business. I didn't need to print these 4 documents, so I'll chastise myself later. But again, from an environmental perspective, do we have the right controls in place? Do we help support how our business runs as much as how we help support potentially nonprofits that are aligned to the environment? So it's an internal and external look in many ways. And so I think with a lot of the uncertainty, it just helps us realize, especially after the financial crisis, we came to terms about, are we really doing the right thing for customers, our community, and ultimately does it translate to sustainability? And I think that's a big priority for us as a company. And so we won't be flashy, but we'll be slow and steady, and that's what we feel will really help us all on a consistent basis. And our CEO is so committed to that, and so he doesn't talk about growth. You won't hear these cross-sale metrics, et cetera. It's really about, is it sustainable growth that supports the communities in which we do business?
Thank you. There are quite a few questions about how one reaches out to a corporate foundation or a corporate giving program. If you don't have a personal contact within a company, how would you suggest one go about initiating a relationship?
So we get 8,000 grant requests a year. And they all have to, so we try to do a lot on our website, and that's why it reads a lot heavier than it needs to. And they all have to go through compliance checks. That's just something that we have to do because of oversight. So it's just really hard, even though I have a team of 25 people, to be responsive to requests. I mean, it's just a limitation. So we try our best to put everything we can on the website. So I think just personally for Genentech, it's just sometimes it's just, you just have to see the website and you apply, and then someone will contact you, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Yeah, once again, I have aspirations to be more like my colleagues. And right now we are more manual. It's literally just me or working through one of my colleagues, which means that we sometimes can't be as responsive, or we don't have as much of a structure, a clear structure for folks to follow, which is good and bad. So, yeah.
You want to share?
No, I was just going to share again. We all have the best intentions of really wanting to connect and meet with new potential partners in the community. I think, again, from a capacity perspective, it is a constraint. We are all, to your point, local, and so we deal specifically with San Francisco East Bay, and then I literally have 88 counterparts across the country for each of our markets. So even as close as Silicon Valley, North Bay, Sacramento, and so again, in that way, that's how we bring it very personal and local. The flip side is, the Bank of America Foundation website is really one of your best resources, as well as the San Francisco one that I mentioned, just to at least ensure that there's alignment. And so again, many of these relationships were built over time with our existing community partners, and so again, it's really that balance of, is there an innovation, is there something very compelling, and in many cases, we typically get our best introductions, I said, not only from our teammates, but also from some of the community partners that we're working with. And that's a huge referral source for us to say, Heidi, check out what so-and-so's doing. This is something that I'm really excited to be able to share with you. And so that's another great opportunity. But again, telling your story and being able to validate both the inspiration and the passion with some of the impact that you're making is what makes it most compelling. And when there's strong alignment and then the opportunity to engage our teammates from a board service, committee service, or even volunteerism, especially around our professional skills, financial literacy, et cetera, though. So the more of those that we can tick the box to at least get that alignment in place, I think that's very helpful.
Thank you. Of course. So we're getting close to time. So obviously, and I apologize, I'm not going to get to all of the questions, but I thought as we were closing, I just want to ensure that everyone has had a chance to say what they want to say, and maybe we could end on one final point that you would give to nonprofits on how best to be engaging with corporations. Anyone can start?
I'm happy to. It'll make me feel better when I'm done. I'm so thankful to be here and to be able to connect with all of you today. I think the biggest piece for me is just coming into a role and learning even more about the company that I've worked for 15 years and the kind of incredible partnerships that we have in the community, recognizing a lot of the amazing work, but also a lot of the significant challenges that we still have ahead. So it's been an amazing opportunity for me, and I'm so encouraged by what I've heard from many of my partners and teammates here. But I think just the final piece for me is, again, when you have the opportunity to connect, this is the only advice I'd give, be specific in your either request or more powerfully in your recommendation, because it's very difficult for me, especially being new to role over 5 months. Just on a personal level, I felt like I was running for an office because just so many calls, so many meetings, so many connects to make. And so if there's something very passionate or compelling, please be the one to bring it to us. And what I mean by that is be specific. And here's a great example, Heidi, of how our partnership has worked with XYZ organization. we'd be happy to provide you a proposal on how we can replicate that with Bank of America. And so that helps me really get a sense of it in a tactical way, because once we get past the strategy and all of that, it's really good to know what's the good that's been done and what are some great examples that you can provide. Because I think that helps us versus just understanding the work you do and then feeling like we potentially have to be the one that comes to you with, okay, here's how we could potentially partner. So I think that would just definitely give you an edge.
I think that's great. You know, that was going to be my point of understand the fit. Sometimes there isn't one. Let's not force it, because I think we all do it often enough that we can actually see that it's not going to work out. A couple of other things that I encourage people to say is, you know, just bring stats, bring numbers, bring stories. I think that's really helpful. And then the third point that's helpful for us, and like I said, there is a trend within philanthropy to start to do more collaborative funding. To the extent that you can articulate how you are working with partners, how you are plugged into that ecosystem, how you're leveraging other things, it just mitigates a risk that a funder is thinking about, right? So we're not doing one-off transactional funding, but we're actually investing in something that is plugged into an ecosystem. If you can articulate that, that is a really powerful story, besides the great work that people do.
I don't think I have much to add. I think that's exactly right. Being specific, being connecting back to what you know our focus areas are, which is at the moment kind of SOMA, in particular our neighborhood, and San Francisco to some extent, and hopefully soon kind of broader issues like creativity and education, and you know, we definitely do a lot of work around diversity and workforce development, I would say. And then third, I think just being patient with you know, some of the companies like mine that are newer and are kind of getting its sea legs, so to speak, on the social impact philanthropy work, and know that many of us have the right intention and are just trying to kind of catch up with action. So, and thank you again for having us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all for being here. Breathe now.
I didn't mean to close
No,
the
get that.
Lakshmi.
Fine. It was a little over. Hi, how are you?